registration is ongoing. If you haven't registered, see Bill Overton out in the foyer, and he will fix you up with your Speleo news and your T-shirts and everything else that you paid for. If you registered late, we're charging extra for the Speleo news because we had to print just a limited number, and we're sorry about that. I'd like to turn things over to begin this morning to Mr. Jody Bailey, our audio-visual director. And Jody is going to lead us through these presentations, which are going to last the rest of today. And then tonight, of course, we're going to reconvene here at 6:30 with all these walls opened up for the banquet and the evening program. So to get things moving, Mr. Jody Bailey.
Amazing. For the past 6 months and then the past 2 weeks and the past, I've been saturated with the history of this grotto. It's been very, very impressive. I have been meeting with half of this room for hours, 18 hours a day on my computer editor at home, looking at all the photos, the old and the new, the video interviews, video from the past that I had shot. I had so much material that couldn't put it all in one package. Anyway, the program here today pretty much shows you what you've got. And mostly it's just people sitting in here today having a good time, telling about old times and talking about times that are going to be coming up. Anyway, I've got a little 5-minute intro that says that, and then we're going to turn the show over to Mr. Ed Yarborough, who'll be talking about, what are you talking about? Vertical caving. That's that new thing that's coming around. He's got an old guy here he wants to teach some new stuff to, I think. No, not true. While trying to write the script for this video and CD that's going to be published really soon, like next week, I was trying to figure out what is the history of the grotto. What is the history of the grotto? You go over all the material, and then it just comes out. It pops out, and it did pop out. The history of the Nashville grotto is the history of people, and those people are sitting right here tonight or today, whatever time it is. And so the history of the grotto is individual stories, all put together to make one big forest. And here we go. Okay, let's start again. This never happens at your grotto meeting, does it? Yeah, that's pretty good. Power off instead of hit input. So we'll chat among yourselves for just a minute here.
To be able to do this, but hopefully sometime during the day you'll have an opportunity to come up and look at some of the stuff on these tables. This actually, we hope, sometime will be moved over to the display room, because I'm sure others will have things they'll want to put in here. But a lot of these materials, photographs, and other things, particularly on this side over here in the plastic covers, are documents from the early days of the grotto, particularly the early 60s, which is my era. The original grotto charter, as far as I know, is lost. We don't know where it is. Might have been in Roy's house when it burned up, but it's gone. But we do have the charter that was issued in 1961, and the cover letter from Pete Petrie, the NSS, sending us our charter. So you might want to look at some of that. And then over here on the table, to your left, my right, is a small collection of early rappelling and climbing equipment. Bill Cuddington's leather pads that he used for body rappelling in 1951 and 2, Bill, basically, 52, are over here. A piece of 5/8 manila rope, the same rope that I used to go down Surprise Pit in 1963, is preserved in here. The helmet that Tank Gorin loaned me the money to buy from a hardware store in Monterey in 1961. If I talk long enough. Okay. And there are quite a few seats down here, folks in the back, if you would like to be more comfortable. We've got chairs here. And While the light man figured out how to turn the lights off, you can come on down. Okay, now stand by for Jody's next mistake.
Welcome to the Nashville Grotto 50-year celebration, a reunion of cavers, explorers, and friends. The Nashville Grotto is the oldest organized caving club in Tennessee. Today we honor those who created this organization and relive its history and some of its high points. Today's program will include Grotto members telling past stories of discoveries and the history of caving in Tennessee. Ed Yarborough and Bill Cuddington start the day off with a history of vertical caving in Tennessee. Tom Barr and Roy Davis are next, telling their story of the original Tennessee Cave Survey. We will break for lunch and meet back here at 1 p.m. and listen to John Smyer recount the mapping of Cumberland Caverns and progression of cave surveying in Tennessee. At 2 p.m., a longtime Grotto member, Larry Matthews, discusses the story behind his two most well-known books, Descriptions of Tennessee Cave and Cumberland Caverns. Small rooms can lead to big caves. Joe Buckner and David Parr will revisit two of the biggest cave discoveries of the 1980s, Blue Spring Cave and Nunley Mountain Cave System. At 33.3 miles, Blue Spring Cave is the longest cave in Tennessee. Sorry, Roy. This year, Innocence Convention in California, the Nashville Grotto was awarded the prestigious Certificate of Merit for our efforts in preserving the Spencer Mountain Cave System. At 4 o'clock, Chuck Mansdorf and John Hallfeld present the Grotto's struggle to save Dry Fork Creek and its world-class cave system. We will reconvene in this room at 6:30 for the evening banquet and program. Roy Davis is our keynote speaker, followed by a video history of the Grotto by Jody Bailey. The hospitality suite will be open after adjournment. Please drop by and swap lies and cave stories with your fellow cavers till the wee hours. But don't stay up too late, because Sunday morning, cave trips are heading off to some local classics. You will need to sign up for these and be on time. Thank you for attending our 50th anniversary, and we hope you enjoy the celebration as much as we do.
This evening, after the banquet, I believe a 61-minute show, is that right, Jody? So you want to be sure to be here for that, but I think it'll be one of the highlights of the weekend. We don't have time, as I'm sure you know, to cover 50 years of history of vertical caving. I made a decision, I guess a week or two ago, to make a battlefield promotion, and that's why Bill Cuddington is over here with a green tag instead of a white alumni tag, because even though he never went to OCS, ROTC, or West Point, Bill Cuddington is the only guy I know that can really tell the full story of what was going on in the 50s in vertical caving. I was much too young, not nearly smart enough to know about that. And so he is a co-presenter today, and I'm going to lean on him heavily for these factual things in the early 50s. We've got about 80 slides here we want to run through. We'll have to go fast because of the time. But the intent is to give you an overview of the amazing progress, the amazing development of a sub-sport, you might say, of caving, what we call vertical caving. Now, Bill can tell his own story, and much of it is in the Speleo News, but just from a personal perspective, I can still recall as a 16-year-old, wide-eyed, novice caver, basically being told by older people, older and wiser, I assume, that only a fool would go down a pit. And Dr. Barr, who, as we all know, is the real godfather of the Grotto, wasn't interested in going down pits. But he was smart enough to know that somebody needed to do it. And he and Bert Denton had been together on the day that Don Ball fell at Higginbottom Cave in December 1950. By the way, it's one of the errors in our publication. He fell in 50, he died in 51. That's why the date gets mixed up sometimes. But they were on the way to Higginbottom Cave to meet Don Ball the day he died. And I think Tom would probably agree with me in saying that he and Bert were profoundly affected by the death of their friend in that cave that day. And neither one of them ever really were that interested in going down a lot of big pits. But they knew somebody who was. Bill, come up here a second. How about a quick hand for vertical caving? Davis actually showed me how to make cruciate knots and rappel on a carabiner and all that stuff. But Roy had been taught by Bill. And I would like to ask Bill, if he doesn't mind, this is a total shock, I was going to ask him to do this, but I want this to be totally spontaneous. Tell how Roy rigged into rappel at the entrance to Schoolhouse Cave.
Well, he sort of rigged in backwards like, and that's when we found out he really didn't know how to get into body rappel, but really he hadn't had anybody, he hadn't seen any mountaineering books, and he really didn't have anybody to tell him. So, but that's when you found out, you know, excuse me, he needed my allergies, he needed some coaching. But he's a natural at it, and still could be.
Bill has a future in politics, I think. The truth of that story is actually written. Roy was candid enough to tell the story on himself. Some mountaineer guy came up to him at the entrance to Schoolhouse Cave and ordered him out of the cave. And they thought the guy represented the safety chairman of the NSS, and they were concerned that they were going to be drummed out of the society shortly after they joined. But there are just so many stories like this. We're not going to have time to tell them all. What I'd like to do is see how quickly we can get through the slides and the stories that go with them. And then at the end, if we have any time, or if Roy and Tom are willing to concede us a little time, we'll try to answer some questions that some of you may have about these old days and how all this stuff came to be. So if the light man can turn them off one more time, we'll go to, I'm not a high-tech guy, by the way. I have a slide projector here. It was made by Kodak probably sometime in the 60s. And we'll have to close those doors. this is not a good picture. It won't focus that well. The only reason it's in here as the #1 shot is that there's a story here that has to be told. As you know, if you've looked at Speleo News, there was a period of about 9 months in 1953 when Roy and Tank and Bert Denton and Tom Barr and Bill Cuddington and a bunch of other people were just going caving all the time. And they had an amazing ability to go directly to some of the classic caves and pits that are still considered among the best in the state. And one of those was the Goof. The Goof being a word derived from the French name for a chasm. And we've got to try to keep that door open. Well, we got to let Tom Barr in the room, don't we? If somebody could be a doorman for us, just to let them know that every time they open the door, they're going to change the show. This basically was a pit with a very small entrance beneath that sandstone block that Ken Bunning and Tank had then found in 1953 in October, almost exactly 50 years ago. It turned out to be 250 feet deep, and the story of that descent is in the book by Franklin Folsom, Exploring American Caves. Many of you have probably read it. The thing that's amazing to me is, though, however, after that day, Bill Cuddington, I believe, took Cliff Foreman and possibly one other person. Huntley Ingalls, Bill? Yeah. Okay, Bill took Huntley Ingalls and Cliff Foreman back to the Goof on a later trip. And for almost 10 years, that pit sat there. Nobody went in it. That is a good illustration, I think, of the condition of vertical caving in the Southeast and the United States, for that matter, in the late 50s and early 60s. People just didn't do it. They considered it to be too dangerous. They considered it to be possibly foolhardy. And even when Tommy Hutchison, in this picture, and I found this thing again, finally, after getting good instructions from Ken Bunning, in 1962, we had to look and look, and he didn't go down. So I was left to take pictures of myself with my camera on the tripod, using a self-timer. And I have a collection of these. I've only got a couple of them in here, but I have a collection of these pictures taken of myself by myself at the bottom of the pit because there was nobody to go with me. Turned out that Harry White was doing the same thing starting in 1964. And there were several people, Richard Bilbrey over in Murfreesboro, same thing, going by himself because he didn't have anybody that would go with him. Here's Kirk Holland and Ken Moore at the bottom of the Goof a couple of years later. Then in 1963, I felt like I really had it made. I had finally met Bill Cuddington. We went to the convention. Roy and Barbara took me to the convention in Mountain Lake, Virginia, the summer of 1963, and I got to meet Vertical Bill. The first cave I went to with him was Grapevine Cave, shown here in West Virginia. And Bill showed me his spool. In fact, he loaned it to me. He had a spool for rappelling that he thought was going to be the device that would replace the carabiner rappel and the body rappel. I took that spool back to McMinnville, where I was working at Cumberland Caverns as a tour guide. Took it downtown to one of the machine shops and asked the local welder to copy it. He made one, and since he was basically an automobile guy, he thought it'd be a good idea to coat that thing with something so it wouldn't rust, so he chrome-plated it. So I had a chrome-plated rappel spool. I had gone one up on Mr. Cuddington. And then I felt like I was ready to go to Fern Cave. In 1961, my first year as a tour guide at Cumberland Caverns, I noticed some of the big boys, some of the Huntsville guys, and Bill Cuddington and some of them over in the corner talking about a new pit that had just been found down in North Alabama. Turned out that was Surprise Pit. Here again, you have an interesting commentary on how things work. After Bill and Francis McKinney and, let's see, Bill Garrison, and several of them went down in 1961. Only one other man, a fellow from Illinois, made that bid until September of '63. And I wanted to do it so bad that after that summer, I bought the rope, some of which you see over here on this table, got on a bus, went to Huntsville, called my friend Harris in this picture here, and went to the bottom of Surprise Pit with my chrome-plated rack, or spool. And that's it there in my left hand. And again, the camera and the self-timer taking the picture at the bottom of the 426-foot drop. And no, I bought that rope at Carter Hardware, 460 feet of 5/8 manila. And this is the first bid I did with it. Now that's what it looks like years later with flash powder. I know we're going to have to go a little faster here. Bill's development of the single rope technique was really based on the fact, I think, that he didn't like the ladder. The ladders were bulky, they were heavy, they were difficult to climb, and you still had to have a rope for safety. Otherwise, they weren't safe. And I think it was Larry Sabatinas, wasn't it, Bill?
Yeah.
That had the
first cable ladders in America.
Yeah, Larry Sabatinas up in Virginia had a bunch of cable ladders, and Bill had tried it and didn't like it, and so he just, as a one-man show, kind of back in those days, developed the single rope technique.
Well, I started having to go by myself a lot.
Yeah. If you notice people standing off to the side tonight at the banquet, you know, kind of lonely and awkward looking, those will be vertical cavers. We're all kind of loners, and that's just the way we are, I guess. But we had to use the manila rope because that was the only thing available. And you could buy it at hardware stores, you could buy it at lumber places, and if you got good rope, you know, it was okay for a while. I didn't know anything about it. Bill may have known more about the different grades of manila, but we generally used 1/2 inch. I decided to go to 5/8 inch on the fur and cave rope because I didn't want to die, and so that's what we used. And it turned out later that the nylon rope shown here, this is blue water. I apologize to Bill for showing blue water. I didn't have a good PMI picture to show you, but little commercial there for PMI. These are some of the various ascending devices, mechanical as well as the prusik knot there in the middle, that have been used over the last 40 years, roughly, 35, 40 years. And it's come to the point now where virtually anybody in reasonable condition can climb 100 feet of rope without much difficulty. But back in the good old days, you had to carry this big, heavy rope, and of course, you know, we always got the dumbest guy in the group to carry the rope. That's why Alan has it in this picture here. Sorry, Alan. And if you can look at what's on my knee there, that's the big, heavy, solid steel spool that I had made later. I don't know why I did that, because it was heavier, it got hotter, but it had a beveled spool that was just really cool looking, I thought. And we're on the way here to Valhalla shortly after it was found back in the mid-60s. Now, Kirk Holland, who's here today, came along pretty quick in the early 60s, and he and Larry Matthews, Lewis Hart, and a bunch of them, George Benedict, all those guys from Hillsboro, picked right up on it, and a lot of them made spools, and here's Kirk entering the pit up on the short mountain that we call Young's Pit, and you see his spool. Kirk, where are you? Did you copy mine or?
Right down to the chrome plate.
Right down to the chrome plate. You know, this is the 60s, folks. Anything with chrome on it was better. Now, the first time he did this bit, if I'm correct, and by the way, y'all correct me if I say anything wrong up here. I don't want to put out any false information, but I believe the first time he did this bit, he only had 150 feet of rope and didn't get to the bottom. Is that right, Kirk? That's right. Okay. But he knew somebody with 400 feet of rope. That was me. So he invited me to go with him. Wasn't that nice? And here he is sitting on the bottom, next to that little possum skull or whatever it is. Made it to the bottom of Young's Pit. I like the way all these dark pictures have exit signs at the top. You know, it's good to know how to get out of these things. This is Bill Tozier's wife at the top of the hellhole on Bone Cave Mountain. When Tom wrote his book, he included some lost caves and pits. There were things that he learned about but never was able to locate and explore. And as a result, he had a pretty good list of lost caves, and one of them was the hellhole on Bone Cave Mountain. And I think it was Tommy and I that found this, but anyway, somebody helped me locate it. And it turned out to be about 140 feet, nice little drop. And years later, I took Bill Tozier back to it. And Bill and Jay Arnold, who is here today, were cavers from Indiana who came down to tag and did a lot of the really good stuff back in the 60s. Now I'm just going to quickly flip through a number of pictures here taken in various classic pits around Tennessee and Alabama. This is the Cascade Plunge that Roy and David Westmoreland and some of them found back in '53. It was lost for a long time until Bill Dean and the Knoxville Cavers relocated it. This is one that Alan Lincoln and I found in Alabama while I was on, no, I wasn't on leave yet. I was getting ready to go to the Army in 1968, and we stumbled across this and called it Balcony Sink. And one of the reasons for that is that we didn't have enough rope. The farmer that told us about it, it said it wasn't that deep, so we only took 120 feet of rope. And that's why this is probably the only picture you'll ever see of anybody rigged on the short side of this pit. And we did that because we didn't have enough rope to do the high side. And when you rig over there, you land on that little ledge and balcony. That's where I am set up with the camera watching Alan go all the way to the bottom for the first time. Harry White in the Deerbone Pit down near Mont Eagle. David Stidham, the day we got to the bottom of Big Cedar Hole. This is Harry White's picture of Kegel Chasm, a pit that he and Franz Mishlock and Buzz Rackley found. Here's Harry with Dave Durham from Chattanooga in Parker Pit. Harry in the Booger Hole. Hall Pit. Jim Hall, are you here? Yeah. Is that name for you? Yes. Jim Hall, right here in the room. This pit is a beautiful pit in Alabama. It was badly messed up by a tornado back in the 70s, but fortunately the pit itself was not disturbed, but sure was hard to find for a few years. Engle Double, named for Dr. Engle from Atlanta. Rocky Mountain Pit. One of the few pits I've ever been down with a nest of copperheads at the bottom. Richard Schreiber, one of the hardcore cavers of the 60s and 70s, the discoverer of Fantastic Pit. And here he is on prissy knots coming out of Honeycutt Pit down in Sweden's Cove near Chattanooga. This is Conley Hole back in 62 or 63 with Bob Laird, my old high school buddy, who wised up and went to medical school and went to Hawaii. Okay. I understand we have some more folks who've come in. What we're going to do is turn the lights on real quick and let y'all find a seat so you won't be uncomfortable. unfortunately, you're discovering some of our little secret flaws. The picture on the back of the Speleo News is flipped, but this is a flash powder picture of Conley Hole taken in 1974. Steve Lofton was with us, I believe, and Larry Adams is on the rope climbing out of Big Conley. This is the bottom of South Pittsburgh pit. This is one of the discoveries made by Richard Bilbrey, the caver I mentioned from Murfreesboro. And if you go to South Pittsburgh pit at just the right time in the summer on a good clear day, you can get a good shaft of sunlight. And the next picture is the one that I named for Trey White's brother. Trey's here. His brother Ricky, now fire chief in Nashville, was present when we recorded Ricky White receiving the 11th commandment. You have to be there right at the right time and have the right conditions, but for about 30 seconds, the beam hit the bottom of the pit just square on. Here's a picture that Harry took of me in Valhalla. As you know, the Southeast Cave Conservancy has now purchased Valhalla and saved it for perpetuity, and I think that's one of the greatest things they've done. They've done a lot of great things, but that was definitely one of the outstanding things accomplished by John Hickman and his group. Here's what we used to call a rope party. Harry and I were getting ready to go to El Sotno in the spring of '72, right after it was found. And we'd never done a 1,200-foot pit, so we were a little nervous about it. So we went down to Neverhole. That's Charlie Weeks in the middle, and that's me, and then Harry taking the picture. And so we yo-yoed Neverhole about 12 times or 5 times, whatever it was. Seemed like a lot, just to be sure we could do it. Yeah, I've been corrected. Never sink. I always called it Never Hole because that's what the farmer told me it was when I went to it. But this is Carl Niles. Carl, you here? Carl was coming. He's was a young soldier from Fort Campbell back in the '70s, and he and Nick Nichols, and some of us did some pits. And this is Carl on the rope in Jive Hole with flash powder. As most of you know, in the basically 43 years that I've been doing this, my main companion has been Harry White. And this is a picture of Harry at the top of Lover's Leap over near Stone Door. And Bill Cuddington taught us about doing cliff drops. We claimed it was practice, but everybody knew it was just fun. And this is Virginia Natural Bridge that Bill, I guess, Bill and Sarah Corey got permission to do this back in the late '70s, and we went with them. That's Kyle Eisenhart going up the rope, lickety-split. And once you figure out you can do this, you know, no cliff is safe. This is Fall Creek Falls in the wintertime. That's ice and snow down there on the rocks. And Harry took this picture of me next to the double falls. Then in 1965, I guess we made another stride of sorts. Bill had located a bluff over in North Carolina called Whitesides Mountain. And he had actually attempted to go down it with what, Bill, a 500-foot rope?
About a 480.
About a 480. And as you know, that's not enough. And so he got down a ways and realized that that wasn't going to work, so he switched over and came back up. And then once again, if you've got a rope, it's kind of like having a car, you know. If you got a rope, man, you got a friend. He contacted Richard Schreiber, who at that time had a braided Samson rope, or braided gold line, wasn't it, Bill? Yeah, braided gold line, about 600 feet. And so we went to Kirk and Richard and Bob Bradley and I and several of them got in the car and went over to Whitesides for the first time, August of '65, to try to do this 620-foot drop. Notice the device that Bill is using there. His idea of using that fireman's carabiner was that you'd be able to rappel over knots. The knot just flipped right through the hole. And the trouble is that that rope gets that sideways twist in it, and at the bottom it's just turning just like crazy. And he got down about 400 or 500 feet on that drop and discovered not only was his rope not on the bottom, but it had basically turned itself into a knot at the end. And so he couldn't go down any farther. And fortunately we had little walkie-talkies, very crude walkie-talkies back in '65, but they were good enough that Bill was able to communicate with Glenn Merrill and Wayne Hudson over on another part of the mountain and tell them that he was stuck. So Bill gets off. He hangs onto the rope, thank goodness, but he gets off on the side of the mountain, flattens himself up against the granite wall on a little ledge, and we untied the rope at the top and went down to the lip, the breakover. I'm going to go back. There's the breakover, and retied it to bolts at that point. Or no, we didn't have bolts at that time. We retied it with a knot and put an additional